Hey, welcome to A Foreigner in the Philippines. Well, as I explained in a previous video a little while ago, I said that we went out today and we drove up for a pleasant day out. We went and we uploaded a couple of videos at the Vidasto, and we had a couple of people to see, and then we decided that we'd take a drive. And we took a very pleasant drive and we went up to Anda. So Anda is close on the way to Tagbilaran, and it caters for people who are on vacation. And what I noticed when I was there was, when you get to Anda, if you ever find yourself in that part of the woods, there's a long road which goes along the coast, but it's a local road. You do a left turn and there you are, and you're passing through small collections of houses which are communities, and they change every so often, and houses are being built, fine houses are being built next to very modest dwellings. Now, once you get to these, start very quickly, you start getting to signs which are showing that there are resorts. And as you go out on that road, on the left, you've got the mountains on the left, and the mountains come down and meet the road, and in that space between the start or the end of the mountain and the main road, you have communities, and whole communities are built there, and there's a tiny school, and you'll see children in a lively community, children going home from school in their school uniforms, kids riding bikes. You can see that there's a whole vibrant community there, and then on the right hand side you have the wealthier people, and the wealthier are installed in their in their resorts, which are in the making. These are work in progress, but they can be very grand. And this got us into, Beth and I, into conversation which didn't go too well, because I couldn't explain properly my point, which I'll try to explain to you now. And my point is that the reason that a foreigner can't own land in the Philippines is so that the Philippines continues to belong to Filipinos. Now, because you have the situation, as in my situation, I'm married to a Filipina, and so I can't own land. I don't own anything. Everything is in my wife's name. Now, all aspects of land and possessions, we have total trust between Beth and I, and there is no problem on that. Some people have a problem on it, but they are the ones who have had their horrendous horror stories, and so they're perhaps you might say they're walking wounded, and they're being very careful the next time around. But what I was trying to say is that it's a good thing that foreigners are not allowed to own land. Now, there are all kinds of ways of getting around this. The Chinese certainly have found a very good way of getting around it, and if you go to Boracay, much of that land there in some way or another can be traced back to ownership by Chinese. They have very, very lavish hotels, which, as President Duterte decreed, had not taken care of the environment, and that's why recently they closed that island down and got it sorted out, and that is the way that it should be. Now, what I was trying to explain to Beth was that as if you have a very poor community in land which, because of visits by foreigners, is looked at in a totally different way to what the locals look at it. The locals have just lived there, and probably lives of hardship in a lot of cases. And then people go abroad to work and they send money home, and so you start to get the nicer houses rising from the poor houses. But that's still by the hard work of Filipinos. And then you'll get someone come who is married to a Filipina, and they'll buy a piece of property, and because they are foreigners, or at least the husband is a foreigner, he probably will pay a very good price for that, because he will deem it to be of greater value than perhaps a Filipino would. Now you get the old house is knocked down and a very nice house is put up in its place, and the houses on either side of that very nice house rise in value. Not the house itself, but the property. Now comes the realization of the people who live on either side of this grand new home that their property is now worth a lot more, maybe double what it was worth before. So they sell, and that creates a precedent now, because other richer people will come in and they'll build a house that is equal to the one that's in the middle. Now you will end up getting 3 lovely houses. Now the values are changing, and what will happen eventually will, and this was something that I failed at getting over and explaining properly to Beth, certainly on camera. This means that local people will not be able to afford to buy the property. Now in the UK, just to give an example, in the UK, as you may or may not know, the UK is made up of Scotland, England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And Wales is a particularly beautiful part of that island of what we think of as England, the British Isles. And what started to happen is very similar to what happens in the Philippines, or is happening in the Philippines, except they didn't have any laws to protect the Welsh. The English started to vacation, holiday in Wales. It's a very beautiful place. It has a lot of rain there, so it's very green, and there are many valleys and mountains and valleys, and it's a great singing nation. So there's a terrific amount of local interest and things of beauty there. And the English would go there, and they would go on vacation, and they would notice that there were places that of great beauty that certainly the local Welsh were not interested in owning, and the prices would be very low. So I actually spoke to, way back then, 1900 and frozen to death I think it was, a musician, a violinist, classical musician, and his wife was a classical musician too, and they talked about how they had gone to Wales on vacation there, and they'd gone 2 or 3 times, and then they started to look around and say, you know, this is a very beautiful place. And they found an old mill, and the mill had a mill wheel, and it was by the old stereotypical babbling brook, and the sound of the water was music to their ears, and they bought this place for absolutely for a song. For them it was for a song. Now theirs became a common story, and more of the English, more of the foreigners started going to Wales and snapping up these, for them, dirt cheap, that's another colloquialism from another video, they started to buy and renovate, restore these places. And once they did, that place would only be occupied during vacation times. So at the max, it might only be, out of the year, maybe 2 months. They might let someone else go there. That might be a holiday villa for somebody. But in the main, the property would remain vacant. Now, if you multiply that by many, what you'll then have is Welsh people seeing these properties around, which are owned by foreigners, and the English are foreigners as far as many of the Welsh go, and it started to make it so that locals could not afford to buy a house when they got married. Young couples would get married, and the property was way out of their league. So eventually a backlash was created, and people who were extremely militant, let's not go into rights and wrongs, they burned these houses, and there was quite a few cases of the empty houses being burned to the ground. Nobody there to protect them, and people could go in and set alight to these lovely houses, and they'd burn them to the ground. And so this backlash obviously had its own, there were ramifications to be paid, prices to be paid, and I'm not even sure how that ever got resolved. But anyway, that's the kind of thing that I am fearful is happening now in the Philippines. I noticed that we went to this beautiful place. It was owned apparently by a German who must have been married to, either married to or in partnership with a Filipina. And everybody that was there as a servant was Filipino. I think of it maybe an oversimplification of, it saddens me to think that eventually what will happen can be that Filipinos become servants in their own country. Now I know that I can't really talk about this because I'm here, and my presence means that great change will happen. Great change has happened in the area that we live, and it has been initiated by me in partnership with Beth. And there are other expats who have brought change in their own way, good, bad or indifferent. So things start to change when foreigners turn up, and that doesn't matter where you live in the world. Foreigners in whatever the country bring change. We're seeing it in not such a good light in many ways in America right now. They're having problems with Muslims. This happened in the UK. People from, I think it was Ghana, if I remember rightly, Ghana were thrown out of their country. There's unrest in Hong Kong. Hong Kong people have British passports, whether they are of limited validity as far as coming back to the UK, I'm not sure. I think that's quite a complicated subject, and so it's not easy, and that's what I was trying to get over to Beth. we did reach agreement. She did understand in the end, but it was off camera. But it got heated for a while. So that was what I wanted to touch on. I want the Philippines to stay in the hands and the ownership of Filipinos. That's what I would like. I see great change coming about in Taliban, and while I am happy that greater opportunities for employment is coming about, the infrastructure is improving, a lot is happening in that small town of Taliban, which in some ways I wish wasn't. But that's another subject. Thanks for looking in. Bye for now.